Colonel Tim Alben is the superintendent of the Massachusetts State Police. He was a leader, coordinator of the investigation after the marathon bombings last year. Colonel, thanks for being with us. Really appreciate your time, sir.
Our pleasure, Jim.
Where were you? What were you doing when you got the word? The race had been beautiful. It was a great day. The elite runners had finished. It's an hour or so after that.
Right.
Word comes, 2 bombs have gone off right near the finish line.
Well, you know, Jim, I've been going to Hopkinton to the beginning of the race for the last 10 years or so. And the state police responsibilities are really there in Hopkinton, and then for some escorts along the way, but it's always about the elite runners. I had actually departed and came back here. I was in East Long Meadow. And yeah, the call I got was from Commissioner Ed Davis. And Eddie and I have been friends for a long time.
Boston Police Commissioner at
the
time.
He is, yes. And Eddie said to me, Tim, he says, we've got several explosions in the city. We don't know exactly what we have, but I need your tactical assets as quickly as possible. And of course, I said, Eddie, they're at your disposal, and I proceeded to turn around and head back to Boston.
Looking at the surveillance camera footage over the next day or two of the marathon crowd at the explosion sites, the investigators pretty quickly were able to isolate shots of exactly where the bombs went off. And I know you've talked about just being struck by the fact that pretty quickly you saw 2 guys come by, leave backpacks, and nobody paid any attention.
Yeah, that's you know, something I still think about today. And again, I'm not being critical of anybody that was there or enjoying the day. This is what we do in America. We enjoy these kinds of holidays and celebrations and sporting events. But I think in, you know, looking back on it, and especially world events and this era of terrorism that we live in, that we're going to have to do more. We're going to have to sort of change the way that we think about things and about our own immediate surroundings and our own safety. And I'm trying to get that message out, I think, to the citizenry that this is important. You're another part of the security package, if you will.
I want to talk more about that, but I think, you know, the saying since 9/11 has been, if you see something, say something. Right. But I think so many of us are worried that we'll see that something that turns out to be somebody left their lunch on a bench.
That's right.
We call it in, it shuts down a mall, it shuts down an airport terminal, turns out to be nothing. That's not how you view it, is it?
No, it isn't. And you know, you're right. I mean, your analysis is correct in the sense that over the last year since the marathon, we've gotten more of these suspicious package calls that we have to send our explosive ordnance people out for. But that's our job. And I don't want to in any way detract from people doing that. You know, that's exactly what we're trying to do, is get people more observant, more vigilant about their surroundings, more questioning, and don't hesitate to make that call or you know, text a tip or whatever the situation may be.
The thing that struck me watching everything that went on that week, the bombings Monday afternoon, finally the capture of the suspect Friday evening, every picture you saw was a different local, state, or federal agency. Now, you know, it's kind of a thing in movies or TV, when you see the different agencies together, there's always a little, you know, jostling. The feds are in charge. No, the state guys. That didn't seem to happen.
No, it didn't. It didn't, Jim, and I tell people all over the country about our lesson here and our relationship here. We've been working together now since 9/11, but more specifically, the 2004 Democratic National Convention, when they came to Boston, was the first large gathering after 9/11, and that really brought us all to the table. We developed not only professional liaisons, but personal friendships. I'm talking about the leadership of these departments. And we've all come up through the system together. So Boston Fire Department, Boston EMS, Boston Police Department, FBI, DEA, ATF, Secret Service. These are people that I know on a first-name basis, and they know me. And I think that's the value in these kinds of relationships.
It seemed like egos were parked at the door. Everybody just said, we got to make this happen and get this done.
We had an objective, and we were a team. And Rick DeLawyer, who's another Western Mass native, Rick used to say, you know, one fight, one team. And I think we all assumed, you know, that proposition.
He was the FBI chief in Boston.
He was the FBI's
special agent
in charge of the Boston office, yes.
Let's go through the timeline just a little bit. Bombings Monday afternoon. By Wednesday, suspects are identified with some help from the public when you got those videos and saw packages being dropped. Thursday night, April 18th, suspects are on the move. They allegedly kill an MIT campus police officer in an unsuccessful attempt at stealing his weapon. Later, there's a shootout with police. Transit police officer is very seriously wounded. He did survive. One suspect dies. The other is wounded, gets away, beginning an unprecedented manhunt. Watertown, Cambridge, Boston metro area. The decision is made early that morning to shut down a pretty good sized part of the Boston metro area. That in itself seems like something out of a science fiction movie. That had to be quite a decision, quite a discussion to get into.
It really was. And, you know, the four principals, I think, involved in that, well, five actually, was Kurt Schwartz, the Undersecretary of Public Safety, Commissioner Ed Davis, Mayor Menino, Governor Patrick, and myself. And you know, essentially we went through what we knew at that point, what we did not know at that point, and we thought that shutting down the transportation system afforded us the very best opportunity to make the apprehension as safely as we could in that Watertown neighborhood. I mean, ultimately, that was the end result, but there was a lot of consternation about that, and certainly, you know, looking back at it, a lot of implications to it as well.
You must have learned a lot from that week and that investigation and that manhunt.
Clearly, you know, you do. But, you know, in this business, a lot of it is pattern recognition, but no situation is ever the same. You know, we've dealt through weather emergencies. We had the tornado out here in Springfield a few years ago. That was a certain demand on services. We've had fugitive apprehensions in the past, but nothing really on this scale, nothing with this complexity to it, nothing really that drew national attention like this event did.
Public cooperation, I know, has been talked about a lot in this case. As soon as the bombings hit on Monday, people sent in or gave you tons of cell phone pictures, photos they'd been taking. You put out the material that was seen on the surveillance cameras of people dropping these bags. You got information pretty quickly. Talk about the component of the public being part of the overall law enforcement effort in a case like this.
So on Tuesday afternoon, I remember one of the first press conferences we had, and everybody had something to add to it. And I remember appealing to the public at that point. I said, you know, in today's day and age, everyone has a smartphone, everyone takes photographs. There are going to be plenty of people who were there at the finish line who took photographs that are relevant, that don't even know that they're relevant. And we need to see those. We need your cooperation. And that began, I think, that whole chapter, really, of submissions of photos and videos to the FBI, and ultimately led us down the path of solving some of this.
We know a massive security effort is planned for this year's marathon for obvious reasons. The fact that something happened before may be tempting to someone. Again, my understanding is about double the number of police along the route, something upwards of 3,000 to 4,000.
Right.
More surveillance cameras than before, integrating surveillance cameras that maybe shops and stores have along the way.
Right.
Every effort's being made to make it as safe an event as possible.
Well, absolutely right. I mean, it's unprecedented in terms of our planning and preparation for this marathon as opposed to in the past. But I also want to dispel, the perception that this is going to become a police state. That people are going to be subject to random searches, and because that's just not true. I think our most important objective is sort of maintaining the integrity, the enjoyment, the celebratory nature of the marathon. This is a great event in Massachusetts, and really it'll be looked at that way across the country. So I don't want people coming to this thinking that they're going to be, searched like they do going through a TSA checkpoint or something of that nature. I want people to come to this marathon. I think this is our opportunity to stand up and say terrorism is not going to defeat our way of life here in this country or in this state for that matter.
I know you've said in some other interviews and talks, you can never make any event, any public event,
exactly right.
100% safe. You can't reduce risk to zero, but you can manage the risk as best you can.
Yes. And Admiral Thad Allen, former commandant of the U.S. Coast Guard, is he's really an individual who I admire a great deal, and he gives a great presentation on this managing risk. I saw him speak about liquid natural gas transits we were doing in Boston at the time. And the point was, look, you're never going to eliminate risk in anything we do in this world. Crossing the street, going out to dinner at night, going to the movies, sending your kids to school. There's a risk associated with everything in this world. But I think when you have the proper security, the people committed to the program, the proper planning, adequate resources, we are compressing that risk. We're getting it as close to zero as we can conceivably do.
Well, Colonel Tim Alben, Superintendent of the Massachusetts State Police, thanks for your time, sir.
My pleasure, Jim. Thanks for having me.